The $3 million inheritance was something I had never imagined I would be dealing with so soon after my father's passing. The weight of grief still lingered in the air, mingling with the sterile scent of his funeral home. It was just days after the ceremony, and the quiet ache of loss felt unbearable, yet amidst this sorrow, there came an unexpected and shocking intrusion into my life. Jack, my husband, who had taken it upon himself to peruse the inheritance documents without asking me, strolled in with an oddly triumphant expression. "Kelly, don't be too greedy," he said casually, as if discussing an ordinary household matter rather than the legacy of my late father. I stared at him, momentarily speechless, struggling to process both the audacity of his action and the words he had just uttered. "Oh, finally I can quit my job. I have to thank that doddering old man," he added with a laugh, tossing the papers carelessly onto the dining table. My heart skipped a beat, and before I could stop myself, I blurted out, "Doddering old man? Are you talking about my dad?" Shock and disbelief choked my voice. Jack, unfazed, continued talking as if nothing were amiss. Ignoring my confusion, he and my mother-in-law immediately launched into an animated discussion about buying a new car and going on shopping sprees, their voices mingling with laughter and excitement. I stood frozen, my mind racing, as the full weight of their greed and insensitivity hit me. I had been bearing the brunt of household responsibilities, running a job alongside countless chores, and yet here they were, casually insulting my father and scheming over money that should have been mine. My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I realized how unbearable living under the same roof with Jack and his mother had become. My anger boiled inside me, threatening to spill over. Forcing a smile I didn't feel, I replied, "Sure, go ahead. Use the money as you wish." My words were calm, but beneath them lay an ocean of fury, resentment, and exhaustion. My mother-in-law, blissfully ignorant of the storm raging within me, clapped her hands together with glee. "That's the spirit, Kelly. Now make sure you work hard and earn money, too. I don't want our savings to shrink." Her tone was gleefully patronizing, as if she were congratulating me for agreeing to be exploited. I nodded mechanically, pretending to absorb her advice while my mind screamed with frustration. I am Kelly Cohen, 38 years old, a housewife who once had a promising career in a pharmaceutical company. My life had been full of love and privilege growing up. My parents were both doctors who ran a well-respected clinic in our hometown, and as their only child, I was showered with attention and care. My upbringing was one of encouragement and support, but also expectation. They had hoped I would follow in their footsteps and become a doctor. I chose pharmacy instead, and while my parents were initially disappointed, they respected my decision, allowing me to build my own path. Life seemed manageable, even comfortable, until tragedy struck 10 years ago. My mother's sudden death in a freak accident shattered our family. The world as I knew it crumbled, and my father and I were left clinging to the pieces of a life that no longer made sense. In that dark period, Jack appeared as a source of support. He was my boyfriend at the time, introduced through a mutual friend, and his presence brought me some comfort amidst grief. 2 years after my mother's passing, Jack proposed. He was an ordinary man, working in the food and beverage industry with a decent income, not the financial powerhouse I had once imagined I might marry. But love, or at least the hope of it, blinded me to practical concerns. I believed we could overcome anything together. When I told my father about our engagement, his joy was palpable. "I've heard how Jack has supported you, Kelly. Thank you. Please take care of her," he said warmly. Jack, standing straight with earnest eyes, replied, "I promise I will make her happy." I remember feeling an enveloping wave of happiness and security as I stood beside him. For a moment, the world felt right again. A week later, we visited Jack's family to formally announce our engagement. His mother, divorced and wearing heavy makeup, scrutinized me with a sharp, evaluating gaze. Her words cut through the air with thinly veiled disdain. "Marriage, her? She's your choice, Jack. Isn't she a bit plain? And older? Wouldn't a younger, prettier girl be better for you?" Jack, quick to defend me but somehow missing the emotional core, countered by emphasizing financial security rather than my character. "Mom, you know Pharmaceuticals, right? Kelly works there. Her father is a doctor and runs a practice. I expected him to highlight my personality, my kindness, or my loyalty, but instead, the discussion revolved around money. His mother's expression softened, her eyes lighting up with satisfaction. "Oh, Jack, why didn't you tell me this before? That changes everything. I approve of the marriage. Nice to meet you, Kelly." Even after this approval, unease gnawed at me. Things seemed smooth on the surface, but my instincts warned me of the trouble ahead. As we prepared for the wedding registration, my father gifted me a luxurious apartment in New York City. "Dad has given us this apartment as a wedding gift. Let's make it our new home and live happily together," I said, my heart brimming with hope. Jack smiled, seemingly content, and our life as a married couple began. But reality soon revealed unsettling truths. Jack, who had lived with his parents his entire life, was almost incapable of handling household responsibilities. Cooking, laundry, cleaning, tasks I had assumed were simple for an adult, were foreign to him. Garbage was left everywhere, and he showed no interest in learning. I, with my desire for a balanced partnership, found my frustration mounting daily. The first year of marriage, I tolerated his carelessness, hoping the honeymoon phase would shield me from resentment. By the second year, however, the exhaustion from managing both work and household responsibilities pushed me to my limit. I mustered the courage to confront Jack about sharing the chores. His response, however, was a dagger to my hope. "I'm tired from work too. You're better at chores anyway. Just do them." Gratitude, reflection, or even a hint of compromise was absent. From that moment on, I carried the full weight of our household, the unfairness of it pressing into my every waking moment. This wasn't the only problem. Jack's mother proved equally difficult. I tried to honor her with gifts for occasions like Mother's Day, selecting a high-quality scarf and carnations. Her reaction was far from appreciative. She scolded me for not purchasing a famous brand, dismissing my careful choice as inadequate. I tried to explain, but she would not listen. When I informed Jack, he shrugged and said, "Just do as she says." From then on, we resorted to giving her cash, a practice that would persist and grow increasingly demanding. By our 5th year, she visited constantly, every trip accompanied by new demands for money. Jack, without complaint, handed it over. Our life together teetered on the edge of financial strain. Despite having a career, I had to dip into our savings to maintain stability. Yet, I persevered, reasoning that she was important to Jack, and therefore, in some way, to me. 8 years into our marriage, the world turned upside down again. My father, whom I hadn't seen for some time, called with news that shook me to my core. He had terminal cancer, with no treatment possible. Tears fell freely as he comforted me, stroking my hair as he had in childhood. "Kelly, this is fate. Let's accept it quietly," he whispered. Balancing work, household duties, and now hospital visits became my daily reality. Jack's support was minimal. He visited only once. I had no energy left for him, as my father's care consumed my every thought and action. During one hospital visit, my father asked cautiously, "Kelly, how is your marriage with Jack?" The question caught me off guard. My mind immediately went to Jack's indifference at home, his mother's manipulations, and the suffocating weight of my responsibilities. I couldn't answer. He seemed to understand, offering words that would forever echo in my heart. "You don't have to endure, Kelly. Think about your happiness. After I'm gone, you won't face hardships." 3 months later, the inevitable arrived. My father passed quietly, leaving me engulfed in grief yet resolute in his final guidance. During the funeral, Jack remained indifferent. The day after, I received a call from a lawyer regarding my father's inheritance. Over $3 million awaited me, earned through both his medical career and real estate ventures. I was overwhelmed by the magnitude of responsibility, yet grateful. Exhausted, I fell asleep, only to awaken to the cheerful voices of Jack and his mother, a storm of disbelief forming in my chest. Jack's audacity was staggering. "Yes, Kelly. Well done," he said, holding my inheritance papers, as if claiming victory. Mother-in-law, oblivious, added gleefully, $3 million. "Isn't that amazing? We can live comfortably for the rest of our lives." Jack then dropped the bombshell, I've decided to split it between me and my mom. My emotions teetered between fury, despair, and disbelief, and I realized that my tolerance had reached its breaking point. Suppressing my anger, I forced a smile. "Sure, use it as you wish," I said. They were ecstatic, and the chaos of their greed soon enveloped our home. Jack quit his job. His mother moved in permanently, spending freely while I continued managing the household and finances. My savings began to vanish, and protests were dismissed with laughter and flippant remarks. 1 month later, they left for Hawaii without inviting me. I realized that action was necessary. Changing the locks, I reclaimed control. Their shock was palpable, but I remained calm and determined. At a later cafe meeting, I handed them divorce papers, confronting the truth of their entitlement and greed. Jack and his mother were flustered, their illusions of wealth and control shattering. I explained that inherited property could not be considered marital property, leaving them speechless. Despite Jack's desperate pleas, I remained resolute. "Take responsibility for your actions. I will not forgive your behavior. I'm divorcing you." The divorce proceeded smoothly. The $50,000 I had moved was recognized as marital property. Jack and his mother, now penniless and burdened with debt, lived a drastically diminished life. I sold the condo we shared, moving into my father's apartment. With the inheritance and my career, I regained stability and independence. Grateful for my father's love and foresight, I embraced the opportunity to live freely, protecting my happiness and forging a peaceful, fulfilled life. As I settled into life after my father's funeral, the echoes of grief and disbelief lingered in every corner of our home. The apartment, a gift from my father, still carried the subtle scent of his presence, a comforting reminder of the man who had loved and guided me so unconditionally. Yet, alongside this warmth came the cold intrusion of reality. Jack and his mother, emboldened by their audacity, treated our home as their personal playground, disregarding every boundary and consideration. Their laughter, previously a distant echo, now filled the halls as they plotted new ways to indulge their whims with my father's inheritance, oblivious to my exhaustion and heartbreak. Jack had quit his job almost immediately after laying eyes on the inheritance, claiming that our financial future was secure and that he could now live without the constraints of work. His mother, practically moving in with us, seemed to revel in the idea of unrestrained access to wealth. They would disappear in the mornings and return laden with luxury items, clothes, accessories, gadgets, all bought with money that wasn't theirs. The 3-star restaurants they insisted on visiting, with menus that I could barely stomach in the middle of my daily grind, became their stage for flaunting what they assumed was newfound status. All the while, I remained trapped in a cycle of domestic servitude, my own needs and desires buried under laundry, cooking, cleaning, and the endless vigilance of keeping them from completely devouring our savings. Jack's attitude was the most difficult to reconcile. In the early years of our marriage, I had tolerated his indifference, trying to remind myself that he had supported me in moments of personal grief and loss. But his complete lack of initiative in the household, his refusal to contribute meaningfully, and his casual disregard for my feelings became unbearable. He would leave dishes unwashed, laundry undone, trash uncollected, as though the apartment were some minor inconvenience rather than our shared space. When I approached him, asking for help, he shrugged with a nonchalance that cut deeper than any insult. "You're better at chores anyway. Just do them," he said, leaving no room for negotiation, no hint of remorse, no recognition of the exhaustion etched into my every movement. Even the small gestures I tried to extend to his mother were met with disdain. I had carefully chosen gifts for her birthdays and special occasions, believing that a considerate gesture might bridge the gap between us. On one Mother's Day, I selected a quality scarf and carnations from a respected department store. When she received it, her disappointment was palpable. "This isn't from a famous brand. Why would you send such a no-name item?" she scolded, her tone dripping with superiority. I explained the craftsmanship, the thoughtfulness behind my choice, but she refused to listen. When I confided in Jack, hoping for at least a hint of support, he dismissed my efforts entirely. "Just do as she says. It's easier that way." From then on, cash became the only acceptable gift, a transaction that robbed our home of warmth and replaced it with tension. By the 5th year of our marriage, Her visits became more frequent, each arrival accompanied by a new set of demands for money. Jack's compliance was unwavering, a smile plastered on his face as he handed over what I had worked hard to earn. Our financial situation, already precarious due to the high cost of living and the lifestyle they insisted upon, grew tighter. I began dipping into our savings to cover basic expenses, forcing myself to balance the delicate act of maintaining appearances while preventing financial collapse. Every withdrawal, every transaction, every indulgence by Jack and his mother chipped away at the life I had once envisioned for myself. Yet, I endured, reasoning that they were family to the man I loved, and somehow, by extension, I owed them tolerance. Then came the moment that would shift my life yet again, my father's call. The sound of his voice, once so strong and comforting, now carried a fragility that made my chest tighten painfully. He revealed the devastating truth: he was suffering from terminal cancer, and treatment was no longer an option. Tears fell freely as he spoke, his voice trembling with the weight of fate, yet carrying a serenity that was almost unimaginable. "Kelly, this is fate. Let's accept it quietly," he said, stroking my hair as he had done when I was a child. The words, simple yet profound, etched themselves into my heart, a stark reminder of life's fragile impermanence. Suddenly, my world was consumed by the dual burdens of grief and responsibility. I had to juggle my full-time job, the seemingly endless household chores, and now frequent hospital visits for my father. Jack's support remained minimal at best. He visited my father's hospital room only once, showing no real interest or initiative, and his absence in the face of my growing stress was both disheartening and infuriating. My time, energy, and emotional reserves were drained by the endless demands of caregiving, and I had little to spare for him, who, ironically, was supposed to be my partner in life. One day, as my father lay in the hospital bed, he looked at me with piercing eyes and asked, "Kelly, how is your marriage with Jack going?" The question was loaded, probing deeper than mere curiosity. I hesitated, my mind racing through the years of neglect, his mother's overbearing interference, and the countless ways I had been taken for granted. I couldn't answer immediately. My silence spoke volumes, and my father, with a wisdom honed over a lifetime, understood. "Kelly, you don't have to endure. Think about your happiness. Don't worry. You won't have any hardships after I'm gone." The depth of his love and foresight overwhelmed me, leaving me crying silently, grateful for the guidance he had always provided. 3 months later, the inevitable occurred. My father passed away quietly, leaving an empty space in my life that no amount of time or distraction could fill. I immersed myself in the arrangements for his funeral, navigating the grief-stricken chaos with a heavy heart. Jack, true to form, remained indifferent, showing no empathy, no initiative, no desire to support me in the most basic human sense. Despite his presence, I had no energy to direct my anger toward him, as the responsibility of honoring my father's memory consumed my every moment. The funeral was attended by many of my father's friends, colleagues, and patients, a testament to the life he had led and the love he had cultivated. Even Jack and his mother showed up, but their presence was hollow, marked by obligation rather than genuine respect or grief. The day after, a lawyer called regarding my father's inheritance. The news was staggering. After taxes, over $3 million had been left to me, his only daughter, the entirety of his legacy amassed through decades of dedication to medicine and real estate investments. The magnitude of responsibility shook me to the core. I had never handled such wealth, and the sudden transition from grief to financial power was dizzying. Exhausted, I spread out the inheritance documents on my desk, reviewing each page, and eventually dozed off briefly on the sofa. When I awoke, I was met with the cheerful and intrusive voices of Jack and his mother, an unwelcome storm of entitlement entering my sanctuary. "Jack! Mom! When did you come?" I asked, stunned. Jack approached with an exuberant smile, holding the documents in his hand. "Yes, Kelly. Well done," he said. My heart sank further as my mother-in-law chimed in with naive excitement, $3 million. "Isn't that amazing? Now we can live comfortably for the rest of our lives." Then came the bombshell. Jack, turning serious, revealed, "By the way, about this $3 million, I've decided it will be split between me and my mom." The audacity, the audacious disregard for both my father and myself, pushed me to the brink. Suppressing the fury that threatened to overwhelm me, I forced a calm smile. "Sure, use it as you wish," I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding with rage and disbelief. They clapped their hands, ecstatic, and from that moment, chaos consumed our household. Jack quit his job entirely, leaving all responsibilities and financial strain to me. His mother, practically living with us, indulged in a lavish lifestyle, treating our home as her personal playground. My savings, painstakingly accumulated, began to vanish before my eyes. Even when I protested, citing the reckless nature of their spending, Jack only laughed. "What are you worried about? $3 million is coming soon," he said, dismissing my concerns with an infuriating nonchalance. I warned him that the behavior had to stop, but my words fell on deaf ears. A month later, they left for Hawaii, excluding me entirely. The audacity of their actions forced me to take decisive steps to reclaim control over my life, and I realized that tolerance was no longer an option. I changed the locks on our front door, asserting my authority over the home, and prepared to confront them directly. Their shock and outrage were palpable, but I remained calm, measured, and resolute. The realization hit me like a tidal wave: I would no longer allow greed, entitlement, or indifference to dictate the course of my life. The seeds of change had been planted, and the story of reclaiming my dignity, financial security, and happiness was only just beginning. After changing the locks on our apartment, I finally felt a glimmer of control returning to my life, a sense of empowerment I hadn't experienced in years. Jack and his mother had lived with reckless entitlement for so long that asserting my authority felt almost revolutionary. They had treated my home, my labor, and my father's inheritance as if it existed solely for their comfort and amusement. And yet, here I was, standing firm, refusing to be a pawn in their schemes any longer. The calm that came over me, however, was only temporary because the confrontation to follow would demand every ounce of courage I had left. Within a week, Jack and his mother appeared at our front door, dressed in loud aloha shirts, a mocking display of the vacation they had taken without me. I watched them through the intercom, feeling a mixture of amusement and exasperation. What do you want?" I asked, my tone calm yet laced with steel. Jack, red-faced with fury, shouted through the door, "What are you talking about? Why won't the door open?" Their disbelief at the locks I had changed was almost comical, yet I refused to give in to their intimidation. "I changed the locks, so of course the door won't open," I replied firmly, my voice carrying confidence I hadn't felt in years. Jack and his mother sputtered, clearly unprepared for resistance. I suggested, with polite authority, that we discuss the matter calmly at a nearby cafe. Begrudgingly, they left, their faces a mix of anger and confusion. Once they had departed, I made my way to the cafe myself, preparing mentally to confront the audacity of their behavior. When I arrived, they were already waiting, simmering with visible rage. The intensity of their expressions, the smugness in Jack's eyes, and the self-assured look of his mother all screamed entitlement. Yet, I felt nothing but resolve. "Hand over the new keys right now," Jack demanded, trying to assert control through aggression. I leaned back in my chair, a serene calm overtaking me. "There's no need for new keys. You both need to leave the house," I stated clearly, letting my words hang in the air like a verdict. Jack's face turned an ugly shade of disbelief and fury, while his mother blinked in shock, unable to comprehend the assertion I had just made. It was time to lay the foundation of my next decisive move. I slid a piece of paper across the table. They looked down to see it was a divorce petition, already filled out and ready to be filed. The cafe seemed to shrink around us as Jack's voice rose in disbelief. "Divorce? You're serious?" His mother gasped, a mixture of panic and indignation painted across her face. I remained composed, my voice steady, slicing through their theatrics. "By the way," I said, "you've been spending lavishly every day. Are you sure your finances are okay?" I could almost see their confidence falter, but their pride still prevented them from fully acknowledging the reality. Jack, spitting out words in frustration, waved his smartphone. "The inheritance is coming, right? We have over $50,000 in our joint account. Look, here it is." He was trying to intimidate me, to use what little leverage he thought he had, but I remained unshaken. At his gesture, I revealed the truth calmly, with measured precision. Of course, it's gone, I said. I'm divorcing you. I had transferred the $50,000 to my account as part of the property division, anticipating their attempts at manipulation. The silence that followed was almost intoxicating, a mixture of shock and disbelief settling over them like a thick fog. Jack's face first turned to anger, then morphed into a smug expression, as if he had a last-ditch trick up his sleeve. Fine, he said, forcing a grin. I'll divorce you. Transfer the inheritance you got from your dad immediately. After all, property acquired during the marriage is split half and half in a divorce, right? I leaned back, letting the calm satisfaction of knowledge wash over me. You might be misunderstanding something, I said lightly. The inheritance I received, even during our marriage, is separate property. It is not subject to division. The expressions on both Jack's and his mother's faces were priceless, pure astonishment mixed with the dawning horror of their misunderstanding. No, that can't be true. That's impossible, his mother exclaimed, her face flushing red with rage and denial. I smiled faintly, mocking their panic as I suggested, please, check for yourself. Jack, frantically scrolling through his smartphone, read aloud, almost in disbelief, property inherited by one spouse from a parent is considered separate property. Therefore, it is not subject to division. Their arrogance crumbled with every passing second, the facade of entitlement cracking. Jack approached, his usual bravado replaced by desperation. Kelly, please don't divorce me. I have no savings, no job. How will I live if you divorce me? He pleaded, his voice breaking for the first time. I faced him squarely, the fire of justice burning brightly in my eyes. Take responsibility for your actions, I said firmly. I will never forgive how you both treated me. I'm divorcing you. And if necessary, I will go to court to ensure justice is done. The fear that flickered across their faces was a reflection of the power I had reclaimed. Jack and his mother, who had never known limits, suddenly found themselves powerless, their arrogance replaced by anxiety. Their pleas became small whimpers, their confidence evaporating in the presence of my resolve. I rose from the cafe, leaving them to process the consequences of their choices, and stepped out into the sunlight, a symbolic rebirth into the life I had always deserved. Following the divorce proceedings was surprisingly straightforward. The $50,000 I had transferred to my account was recognized as part of the marital property division. Jack and his mother, stripped of the illusion of easy wealth, were forced to face the harsh consequences of their reckless and entitled lifestyle. Having squandered money from the property division and racked up further debts from overseas trips, they now lived in a modest, deteriorating apartment. The contrast between their former lavish lifestyle and their current reality was stark, almost poetic in its justice. Meanwhile, I reclaimed my independence completely. I sold the condo I had shared with Jack and moved into my father's apartment, a place that now symbolized both his love and my newfound freedom. With the inheritance safely in my control and my career intact, I could finally breathe, free from the constant stress of manipulation and greed. My life, once overshadowed by Jack and his mother's demands, was now a canvas I could paint on freely, a space where my happiness and well-being were the priorities. This period of liberation was not just about financial security, it was a profound psychological and emotional reclamation. 4 years, I had been trapped in a cycle of obligation, suppression, and endurance, shouldering responsibilities far beyond what was fair. Now, with the divorce finalized and the inheritance secured, I could embrace a life of balance and fulfillment. I could work, manage my home, and live comfortably without the shadow of exploitation looming over every decision. As I reflected on the tumultuous journey, the months of grief, stress, and confrontation, I realized that every challenge had honed a resilience in me I hadn't known I possessed. My father's wisdom, his foresight, and the lessons from my experiences with Jack and his mother converged into a single understanding: happiness is not given, it is claimed. It is maintained through boundaries, assertiveness, and an unwavering commitment to one's own dignity. Even as Jack and his mother struggled in their reduced circumstances, drowning in debt and regret, I felt no malice, only a quiet, satisfying clarity. I had emerged intact, stronger, and more self-aware. Their greed and entitlement had been matched by my patience and strategy, and ultimately, justice had been served. I was free to live life on my own terms, to honor my father's memory, and to embrace the future without fear of being overshadowed or manipulated again. The weeks after finalizing the divorce brought an unexpected calm over my life, a serenity I hadn't felt in years. Waking up without the oppressive weight of Jack's indifference and his mother's constant intrusion was liberating, almost surreal. The apartment that had once felt like a battlefield was now a sanctuary. Light poured through the windows, dusted with the remnants of my father's presence, and for the first time, I could breathe deeply, untethered from the chaos that had consumed my daily existence. Every corner of the apartment felt like a gentle reminder of the life I had reclaimed, a life that was mine, free from manipulation, entitlement, and relentless disrespect. The divorce had been the turning point, but the financial freedom that came with my father's inheritance provided me with a stability I had never imagined. I no longer worried about every dollar spent on necessities or the looming pressure of paying for Jack and his mother's indulgences. My work at the pharmaceutical company continued as before, but now, I could allocate my time with balance and discretion. I had energy again, not just physical, but emotional, creative, and mental energy that I had thought was lost to endless household chores and caregiving responsibilities. The weight of exhaustion that had pressed on me like a second skin was gone, replaced by clarity and purpose. With this newfound freedom, I began to rediscover the parts of myself that had been buried for so long. I explored hobbies I had neglected, spending time with close friends, and even indulging in small luxuries that brought me joy. Weekends were no longer spent tiptoeing around someone else's schedule or cleaning up after people who never appreciated it. Instead, they were mine to enjoy, to plan, to cherish. I could cook the meals I wanted to eat, decorate the apartment to my taste, and even plan trips without seeking approval or worrying about the whims of Jack or his mother. Each act of self-care, no matter how small, reinforced my autonomy and sense of worth. The absence of Jack and his mother also allowed me to reflect deeply on the nature of my past experiences. I remembered the years of relentless compromise, the sacrifices I had made quietly, the accumulation of resentment and frustration that had gone unspoken. I recalled Jack's constant dismissal of household responsibilities, his blind loyalty to his mother, and the way he had manipulated situations under the guise of affection. These memories, once sources of anger and despair, became lessons, hard-earned insights that fortified my resolve. I realized that I had endured not out of weakness but out of love, patience, and a desire to preserve family harmony, even when it was undeserved. Financially, I now had the ability to live comfortably without fear. My father's inheritance, coupled with my own savings and income, ensured a life of independence. I sold the condominium I had once shared with Jack and moved fully into my father's apartment, a space imbued with memories, love, and respect. Every item I placed, every corner I arranged, reflected my renewed sense of ownership over my life. The apartment became more than a living space, it became a symbol of resilience, a tangible representation of the power to reclaim control, and a sanctuary where I could plan the next chapter of my life without interference. Even though Jack and his mother had been removed from my immediate world, I couldn't ignore the consequences they now faced. News of their financial downfall reached me, and while I did not celebrate their misfortune, I observed it with a quiet satisfaction. The lavish lifestyle they had taken for granted had been replaced with bills, debt, and the hard reality of managing a life without the cushion of inherited wealth. Jack, who had once flaunted his supposed security, now scrambled to make ends meet, his bluster replaced with desperation. His mother, who had spent years dictating terms and criticizing, now faced the consequences of her entitlement. Injustice had been met with its natural outcome, and I remained untouched by their schemes. Life in my father's apartment also allowed me to engage with the world differently. I could focus on work, expand my professional network, and even consider long-term investments that would secure my future further. The stress of constant household management, which had once consumed my mental energy, was now replaced by strategic planning, personal development, and the freedom to explore ambitions I had previously shelved. Every decision was mine to make, and every choice reflected a life lived on my terms. The weight of responsibility had transformed from a burden into empowerment. Yet, the most profound transformation was internal. The years of struggle, grief, and betrayal had forged a resilience that went beyond material comfort. I had learned to set boundaries without guilt, to assert myself without fear, and to demand respect without apology. My experience with Jack and his mother had been a brutal teacher, showing me the importance of vigilance, self-worth, and the courage to act decisively when my rights were violated. I had emerged from a life of submission into one of autonomy, with every decision reinforcing my independence and strength. The apartment, once a silent witness to grief and loss, became a sanctuary of peace. I filled it with light, warmth, and personal touches that reflected who I had become, a strong, independent woman who refused to be exploited or disrespected. I could host gatherings with friends, enjoy quiet evenings alone, and immerse myself in work or hobbies without the constant shadow of manipulation. Every corner of the space reflected intentionality, care, and love, both for myself and for the life I was determined to build. With the inheritance, I also embraced a sense of responsibility not to Jack or his mother, but to myself and my father's memory. I invested wisely, ensuring that my life was not only comfortable but sustainable. I honored the sacrifices and wisdom my father had imparted, using the opportunities his estate afforded me to create a life of security, fulfillment, and happiness. Each financial decision, from minor purchases to long-term investments, was guided by prudence, reflection, and respect for the life my father had worked so hard to provide. Socially and emotionally, I began reconnecting with the world on my own terms. Friendships that had been neglected due to the constant strain of Jack and his mother were revitalized. I traveled to places I had longed to see, explored new cultures, and indulged in experiences that enriched my mind and spirit. The contrast between the life I had endured and the life I now led was profound, one marked by chaos and exploitation, the other by control, dignity, and self-respect. With Jack and his mother removed from my life, and the apartment now truly mine, I began to experience a profound sense of freedom and peace. For the first time in years, I could move through my days without the constant undercurrent of tension, manipulation, or fear of financial exploitation. The apartment, once a battleground of entitlement and disrespect, had transformed into a sanctuary, a space where I could live on my own terms, surrounded by the memories of my father's love and the fruits of his labor. The walls seemed to breathe, echoing a sense of serenity I had not known in the years dominated by Jack's indifference and his mother's meddling. Financial security, which had long been a source of stress and contention, became a pillar of my empowerment. With the inheritance from my father, my own savings, and my steady income from the pharmaceutical company, I was able to create a lifestyle that was both comfortable and fulfilling. I could invest in meaningful opportunities, travel without restrictions, and indulge in personal interests that had been neglected for far too long. The weight of financial anxiety, which had once pressed upon me like a constant shadow, dissipated, leaving room for creativity, exploration, and joy. Every dollar I spent was a deliberate choice, a symbol of control and independence that no one could challenge. But beyond the material security, the greatest transformation was emotional and psychological. The years of neglect, manipulation, and exploitation at the hands of Jack and his mother had forged a resilience within me, a strength I had not realized I possessed until the moment I decided to assert my rights. The experience had taught me the importance of boundaries, the necessity of self-respect, and the power of decisiveness. I had endured indignities with patience and grace, yet I had not allowed them to define my life. Instead, I had turned adversity into empowerment, grief into determination, and betrayal into clarity. The woman I saw in the mirror each morning was no longer the weary, burdened Kelly. She was a confident, independent, and self-assured individual, fully aware of her worth and unwilling to compromise it. Life began to flourish in ways I had never anticipated. My work at the pharmaceutical company remained a source of pride, but I could now approach it without the distraction of domestic chaos. I started to explore hobbies and passions that had been set aside, including writing, painting, and engaging more deeply in community activities. Friends, who had once drifted away due to my preoccupation with Jack and his mother, returned to my life. Our connections were deeper, richer, and mutually fulfilling, reminding me of the joy of genuine companionship. I also allowed myself moments of quiet reflection, honoring my father's memory and the lessons he had imparted about resilience, integrity, and the importance of self-worth. While Jack and his mother struggled in the aftermath of their financial recklessness, I felt no desire for revenge, only satisfaction in witnessing the natural consequences of their actions. Jack, who had squandered every opportunity, found himself jobless, penniless, and overwhelmed by debt accumulated from their extravagant trips and purchases. His mother, once the domineering figure in our home, now faced the reality of financial dependence and the humility of reduced circumstances. Their former arrogance and entitlement had been replaced with anxiety, desperation, and the stark realization that life does not reward exploitation and greed. Watching their downfall, I felt a quiet vindication, knowing that justice had been served not through malice, but through the natural course of truth and consequence. Meanwhile, I thrived. I continued working diligently, but now with the clarity and focus that had been absent during the years of domestic burden. The apartment, my father's legacy, and the inheritance became a foundation for a life built on my own choices. I could plan for the future without fear, invest in experiences that enriched my soul, and maintain a home that reflected my tastes, values, and independence. No longer constrained by the obligations imposed by others, I was free to cultivate happiness, health, and fulfillment. Every decision I made was deliberate, a reinforcement of my autonomy and the life I had fought to reclaim. The emotional healing that followed was profound. I allowed myself to mourn fully, not only for the loss of my father but also for the years of compromise and endurance I had endured in silence. I recognized the strength it had taken to survive those years, to navigate grief, manipulation, and disrespect without losing myself entirely. Each tear shed, each memory recalled, each moment of reflection became a testament to my resilience. I discovered that true happiness is rooted not only in comfort and security but in the ability to assert one's worth, maintain dignity, and cultivate a life free from the constraints of others' greed or indifference. As the months passed, my life began to feel like a carefully woven tapestry of healing, growth, and opportunity. I traveled, explored new experiences, and reconnected with friends and loved ones in ways that nurtured my spirit. I invested wisely, ensuring that my financial security was not only preserved but enhanced, creating a buffer against any future uncertainty. My home, once a source of stress, became a place of joy and serenity. I hosted gatherings that brought laughter and warmth, filled the rooms with art and music, and allowed the light to pour in freely, both literally and metaphorically. In this newfound freedom, I realized the most important lesson: happiness is not something to be given or received, it is something that must be claimed and protected. I no longer relied on anyone else's approval, support, or generosity to validate my life. My happiness was my responsibility, and I took it seriously. Every act of self-care, every financial decision, every boundary enforced was a reinforcement of the autonomy I had reclaimed. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, had become the foundation for a life built on strength, clarity, and self-respect. And so, as I moved forward, I did so with gratitude, determination, and an unwavering commitment to myself. I honored my father's legacy not only through the financial security he left me but through the life I built in his memory, a life of integrity, independence, and fulfillment. Jack and his mother became distant memories, reminders of challenges overcome and lessons learned. My days were now guided by choice rather than obligation, and my nights were filled with peace rather than worry. Every step I took, every decision I made, reinforced the truth I had discovered: I was the author of my life, the guardian of my happiness, and the architect of a future filled with promise, dignity, and joy. Looking ahead, I was determined to protect this life I had fought for. I would continue to work, grow, and live fully, honoring the lessons of the past while embracing the freedom of the present. The struggles, grief, and betrayals had shaped me, yes, but they had also empowered me. I had emerged not only intact but stronger, wiser, and more self-assured than ever. My father's love and guidance, even in his absence, remained a guiding light, illuminating the path forward. And for the first time, I truly understood what it meant to live freely, wholly, and happily on my own terms, without fear, without compromise, and without regret. I had faced loss, manipulation, and injustice, yet I had reclaimed my life and my happiness. I had learned that strength comes from resilience, that dignity is maintained through boundaries, and that true peace is found in self-reliance and self-respect. The inheritance, the apartment, the financial security, they were all tools to live a life free from dependence and exploitation. But the most valuable gift I had received was the knowledge of my own worth and the courage to protect it. And so, with gratitude, determination, and hope in my heart, I stepped into the future, ready to embrace every moment of the life I had fought so hard to claim.